Lennard, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. It's
Thanks for having us.
Lennard, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay, because I think we need a bit of a primer on what we mean by COVID vaccines. There's quite a few different things about these vaccines which we're not so used to. They're personalized, they're not preventative yet, so can you give us a sense? And also, they share the same messenger RNA technology as COVID, right?
Yeah.
COVID vaccines. So, do you mind?
It's a really exciting field. People with cancer, I'm a cancer doctor, people with cancer want treatments that are safe, effective, easy to give, and really help their own immune system recognize cancer. And that's effectively the potential of cancer vaccines. They've all been based around the same technology that Kate brought through, mRNA vaccines. You give your body a jab, which contains a blueprint or instructions of what the cancer is, what the body should look out for, and the immune system kicks in. And what's amazing is that this future, everything we've learned before from mRNA is now moving into the cancer sphere, and we're now actually on the cusp of real developments. The first licensed drug within 5 years of what Kate did. The benefit coming from the infectious disease space, which gave you all freedoms, into people with cancer. And that's the real potential of what's happening in this technology sphere. And it's great that Wired has started to raise this as a new sphere that we're actually bloody good at.
So it's probably worth just reminding everybody that the COVID vaccines were the same vaccine for everybody, and they're prophylactic. So they were there to prevent severe disease and death. Whereas Lennard's vaccines on the cancer vaccines are therapeutic vaccines, as in you treat cancer patients to prevent recurrence and improve survival.
Exactly. They're definitely not my vaccines. They belong to the world. And industry's doing a good job bringing them through. But you're right. What we're trying to do here, what the community's doing, the greatest researchers, greatest trials, greatest hospitals, is give a drug which, for people who've had the cancer cut out, my job's really hard. I have to give them hope every year that it's not going to come back. For some people, that's guaranteed, and it's the worst situation for people with cancer. What these drugs do is they activate your immune system to start patrolling against that cancer, hopefully reduce the likelihood of it coming back. And that's something we've not had. We've not had cancer vaccine, we've not had this technology, but that's what's great. That's coming to the fore now.
Just a question on the personalized bit. So you cut the cancer out, you send it to a pharmaceutical company. No, you do genome sequencing of the cancer. You get the mutations. You send it to the pharma company who's going to design that vaccine for one person only, for that type of cancer, and then they send it back to the patient. And that's also one of the differences, right?
Yeah, you're right. That is almost science fiction, isn't it?
That's exactly how it works. And so in the case of COVID, it was much more straightforward because you basically had a virus capsule that was covered in spike proteins. So it was much more straightforward that was the protein you want to vaccinate against. What Lennard done on the cancer vaccines is harder because, first of all, everybody's cancer is going to be a bit different. And then the AI tools to try and determine from that particular cancer biopsy which are the key the antigens, which are the key proteins you want the immune system to recognize. Yeah. And that's the real trick.
And Kate, let me ask, whoever read your book is very much aware of how difficult it was in the beginning. I mean, in a pandemic and kind of having that sort of, the industry was developing these sort of treatments in a matter of decades. And suddenly you had a very tight time frame for it, and you did it in a matter of a year. And we were hoping the same now to happen with cancer vaccines, correct? How did we go about changing that, the time frame in which we can take these treatments to the patients?
So for the prophylactic vaccines for COVID, the first thing we're doing is we're treating effectively healthy people. Now, they may all have different comorbidities, but you're not treating the comorbidity, you're treating the person as a healthy volunteer. So the first thing you have to do when you're going to do these enormous vaccinations, you've got to make sure they're safe. And so the scale of the phase 1 trials, which are the safety trials, that were performed on the cancer vaccines were vastly bigger than have ever been done for vaccines historically. So that was the first thing. And it's different with cancer patients because actually you're immediately starting with patients who have cancer, as opposed to in my case, our focus was to develop vaccines which were for the vulnerable, so the elderly and the adults with underlying disease. So what we needed to make sure was those vaccines were safe in those cohorts of people, and then we take it there from being to see if it's effective. Whereas Lennard, you have to go straight into patients who've already got cancer, which means that you've got a much shorter time frame to show that it works.
But I guess we can now accelerate these trials a lot thanks to what was set up.
Yes, except that you still have to have.
Sure.
You've still got to measure recurrence.
I think what we did in this country was amazing because we took an idea that people, the UK public, didn't have to be the last in the queue to get drugs. We didn't have to be the last country to run clinical trials. We could be the first. When technology comes up anywhere around the world, it can fly into the UK, onto our trial sites, and we could lead. That was confidence, that was bravery, that was capability. The investment changed all that. We've got fridges, we've got people who give jabs, we've got a great research system, great hospitals. And what's amazing is that confidence is now in the cancer world.
And it is the time when the NHS actually can be what it needs to be, which is a national health system that enables us to run national trials on big cohorts of people and generate that data. So it's come round to being really helpful. And of course, we did have national clinical trial networks, and so we were able to recruit. I mean, the trial I took part in was Novavax. We recruited 15,000 people in 6 weeks, which for people not in the industry, that is unheard of. That's incredibly quick. So that is what we need to do. Now, it is different in cancer patients because you need to identify which patients are eligible.
But you've seen the news. Everyone's seen the news. The world's first gullet cancer trial, the world's first lung cancer trial, the first European studies. It's happening over and over again. So actually, the confidence is great. And actually, our research system, our healthcare system is great. And actually, there's a hope this will continue. That needs that confidence, don't they?
And let me get, you started on this position at launching, which we call the Cancer Vaccine Launchpad, correct? And at the end of 2022?
That's correct.
And you had to kickstart a whole program. Tell me a little bit about that. And also tell me a bit the early success you had with the Birmingham trial.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic because you have to activate systems. You've got to use what Kate did, which is anywhere a patient is, anywhere a person is, you can open trials. And therefore, one of the great things that's happened is that so many cancer trialists want to do this for their patients. Patients are asking for it. Hospitals want to be seen as world leading. And actually, at the very simple level, what we've done in the UK is make sure that if people want to get access to trials, it's much, much easier than before, and those systems all exist. Mm-hmm. I think the future is there now, actually, where we could have safer, more effective trials, where simple treatments could be given like vaccines.
Can I just bang on Lennard's drum? So the cancer vaccine launchpad, if you take the BioNTech, which was the Pfizer vaccine, BioNTech is now recruiting patients in the UK 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world. Yeah. That is astonishing. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
There's a mutual appreciation here, obviously.
Huge teamwork, thank you, Kate. And then there's so much more great news, actually. Cancer trials are now running ahead of time. So you normally open a trial, run it for a number of years or months, and you hope that you hit that timescale. But actually, the UK started to over-recruit in many studies, and now trials are finishing a year ahead of schedule. So the BioNTech, the Merck, the MSD trials, all happening faster than before. And that's because the public support, everyone in this room, the focus on technology, a healthcare system which can deliver it if it wants to. And actually, that could be a silver lining of everything we've been through since 2020.
And of course, much, much cheaper to give somebody a cancer vaccine versus expensive biological therapy.
But let me get to the second part of that question, which is a story you mentioned when I spoke to you earlier about the Birmingham trial, which was essential for you to kind of encourage the community to go further. And so tell me about that story.
Yeah, so I guess the situation is that We've got technology companies which saw what Kate had done. They saw the UK at its most shiniest and wonderful, able to get research done, and they want to come to the UK and work out, can our centres open quickly? And we've got our great centres, the Oxford, the Cambridge, the Christie, the Manchester, the Royal Marsden. They're all ready to go. And actually what's amazing is that other hospitals wanted to move too. Centres which are not necessarily part of what you would see as like the great successful examples. Birmingham wanted to go. A high throughput, hard-working centre where there's the hundreds of thousands of patients, they want to participate there, and they joined the race to try and open too. And actually, yeah, this was amazing because you saw genuine competition. What you created, the willingness to open, get technology for their patients is being seen in centres that you don't expect. And they put their hand up first. They took the paperwork, they looked at it and said, yes, we want this to help our patients, stamped it and just got on with it. And you're seeing this across the board at the moment, fast opening paces. People with cancer need treatment. You talked about that window. You've had surgery, you need to get the treatment in to try and give it the most effectiveness. We're seeing centres trying to move quickly for that one, and that's what our great centres are doing at the moment.
And this was the skin cancer for a drug that was trying to recruit people globally, but not necessarily getting enough recruitment, basically.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? We've got bowel cancer, lung cancer,
head and neck, esophageal.
Yeah, we've got the whole lot of renal. It's all coming through.
So the reason why, again, it's interesting here is if you compare the UK to the US, in the US, you lose patients to follow-up because they move state, they move jobs, and you've got no central national healthcare system. But everybody here in the UK has an NHS number. So no matter where you move to, you've still got your medical records and you can still find patients. And so that ability to continue to follow is really important.
And you mentioned something quite crucial in all of this, which is the partnership with the pharma companies, which you pioneered that approach during COVID. Not something that governments really did in terms of partnerships with this. It was very ad hoc.
Correct. So the way most healthcare systems work is they wait for a drug to be approved, and then the governments have an RFP and say, right, who can give me these drugs on the best terms? Clearly, that wasn't going to happen in vaccines because the vaccines were still under development. And if you wanted to get the vaccines ready to deploy as soon as they were approved by the regulator, you had to invest in manufacturing early. So we had to invest in the scale-up, obviously, before we knew whether or not any of these vaccines would work, which meant collaboration with the companies. And so because we're little in the UK and we don't pay a lot of money for our drugs, we had to go to the vaccine companies and basically say, look, we can be a great customer for you. So we can help you with manufacturing and scale-up. We can help you recruit clinical trials. So we created a registry of people pre-consented to be approached for clinical trials. And we can help you basically navigate the system so that we can get approved rapidly. So we were obviously not involved in the approval, but we were the sort of white glove concierge to help it happen. And that worked incredibly well. And that is not the normal way that government works. They should work like that, but it's not the way that governments normally work.
And as a result of all of that, now we have two agreements with these two companies, BioNTech and Moderna, right? So with BioNTech, let me get this straight. With BioNTech, we have a deal to provide 10,000 patients with personalized cancer treatments up to 2030. With Moderna, a 10-year investment to produce a center that was going to manufacture 250 million vaccines. That's extraordinary.
It's extraordinary.
Yes, I mean, those were signed after my time. So
thanks to your work.
Maybe. I mean,
we can give her credit.
Well, both of them basically were relying on the ability for the UK to identify and recruit patients and to have basically good inclusion, so you can identify the right patients quickly to bring into the vaccines, into the trials, and then be able to continue to follow them up. Because what you don't want to be doing is recruiting lots of people, jabbing them, and then they move. So you need to be able to continue to follow up. And in cancer, those are potentially long-term. If the vaccines are effective, and you last another 10 years or 20 years, improve survival, you want to be able to measure that. So I think both those two contracts, very good. I mean, the Moderna one is more about pandemic capability in terms of their ability to scale up vaccines for future pandemics. But they're also obviously committed to doing the cancer vaccines.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? 10,000 patients by 2030. That's what's required to prove these therapies. Hundreds of millions of vaccines being made in our country. That's quite amazing, isn't it? It's absolutely fantastic. And the thing that's not mentioned is that the signals that go across the world, when we champion a technology as a country, we're going to have a cancer vaccine advance, we're going to put all these numbers of people through. Other people notice too, and therefore what you're seeing is many other companies start to want to grow in the UK, startups doing really well. The academic sector doing fantastically now, putting research funding, discovering new ways of treating people, and other big companies coming through. And this makes me think, this is what our country should be good for. We should be able to get technologies from across the world, wherever it is, whoever invented it, bring it here, create jobs, create investment, and then take it back to the bit that counts, which we could be changing lives. And that's what's really good about this whole bit. People with cancer getting therapies that we've never had before. And that's what's amazing about the UK ecosystem as a whole. What do you think, Kate?
I completely agree. So, I mean, if you think about it, most vaccines fundamentally, at least the pandemic and prophylactic vaccines, they could be better. I mean, mRNA vaccines have been highly effective in COVID, and they clearly prevent severe disease and death, but they don't stop transmission. They require a cold chain. You have to give them with a needle. There's lots of things. We don't have these pan vaccines yet. So there's lots and lots of new technologies that need to be developed and tested. And that, I agree with you, is, in my world, if I had a magic wand, I would have every single person be part of clinical trials to really start to dig into which are the formats, which are the drugs, which are the new cancer vaccines that are really working. Because most diseases are not cured, and we should be in a position where we can actually start to intervene effectively much, much earlier than wait until you've got symptoms that are really bad and then you start addressing the symptoms. That's not the way that a modern healthcare system should work. We should be intervening, and vaccines is a great way to do it.
The two other aspects come into play with this, especially in the UK. So the fantastic genomics capability we have with Genome England and AI. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about that infrastructure that exists?
Okay, I'll take this one.
Okay.
Technology spheres rise. You've heard great talks today. You've seen the talks about AI. No one saw that coming, the large language models, the ability to learn faster than humans can. You've lived through the genomics revolution, the 100,000 genome project, sequenced huge numbers of people more than anyone else. And then Kate brought through the mRNA revolution with all the tech companies behind it, with the greatest minds testing this. What's amazing here is that we're bloody good at all these three things, AI, genomics, mRNA, and actually the first use cases come up. The greatest companies with the greatest trialists, the greatest centers, are now going to have that first use case for cancer vaccines. And actually this is why it's really exciting to be on this stage today. I'm just a simple doctor, but I can see the future here now. I can see there is this scenario which could arise where actually the treatments are going to be safer.
So I think you should explain to the audience what you mean by the first use case.
Thanks, Kate. So you just have 3 phases to get a clinical trial proven. First phase is safety, second phase is signal that works, and the final phase, 3 trials, is you know how effective it is. It's really exciting to just say that actually the first trial has finished phase 3. It's now just waiting to monitor these people to see how effective it is. If you want to go look into it, it's called V940. It's a Moderna Merck drug, but that will be the first one. And it looks like it may be on course to read out hopefully by the end of the year, which should be within 5 years of that first licensed drug. It's really exciting because the technology rose, it moved into the cancer sphere, and within just a few years, we have the potential for a signal, and that will probably kickstart every other cancer vaccine behind it.
And if it doesn't read out at the end of this year, that's probably good news, because it means that the vaccine is potentially working even better than you think.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah.
That's a momentous moment. That's a big moment in terms of the fight against cancer, right? It will change the paradigm in terms of how we treat these diseases.
If it can be applied to all cancers, I think that's the test. So there will be some cancers for which it will work better. than others. But if you think about the 21st century way of healthcare systems, you want to be able to go ideally into your pharmacy. They take a blood test, they say your cholesterol's a bit high, stay off the cake, do some more exercise, maybe give you some statins. Then as part of that blood test, they work out that you've got some circulating tumor DNA, and they say, well, actually, that's colorectal. There's no reason why you couldn't be vaccinated then against the colorectal cancer, basically to soup up your immune system to say, look, you need to pay attention to this because we're seeing it floating around in your body and you're not paying attention. And then, if you want to project, you could say, oh, and by the way, you've got some risk characteristics that may make you more susceptible to Alzheimer's disease. Therefore, here's another jab, and that will be one again where you're reminding your body that you want to make sure that you don't have the build-up of amyloid plaques and everything else in the brain, and to basically get your immune system back into doing what it should be doing. So I think the future of a joined up health system where you're intervening early and tackling diseases before they really get progressed is hugely exciting and also affordable, because we're getting to a place now that healthcare is just too expensive.
I think you're right. It does completely change the mold. If you're unlucky enough to get cancer because your immune system can't recognize what's come up and you've got a lump, the surgeon will take it out. It will sequence it in all the entire of it, trying to work out what's abnormal, why did it happen, what are all the abnormal spots that your body should be able to recognize. You then put it through an AI algorithm to understand, of all these thousands, these are the bits which you're using as your vaccine, and you stimulate that person with that exact change that's required for them. No one else gets the same vaccine, everyone gets the one tailored for them, and then the immune system is activated patrolling. It's kind of science fiction, but actually that's the world that we found ourselves in, and that's the world that the UK has become really, really good at, and it's the confidence. It's brilliant, actually. It'll change the model of how cancer care could be delivered. We just need to see those trials now.
Yeah, and obviously we're focusing more on cancer during this talk, but you just mentioned Alzheimer's, which is something you've been excited for quite a long time, with the Alzheimer's Discovery Fund, which pre-pandemic, correct?
Yeah. So we have two dementia discovery funds, one that we raised sort of 2018, and then one which just hit target, so we are doing well on that. And that's all about identifying new mechanisms that drive different diseases. So in cancer, 10 years ago or longer, we used to talk about breast cancer, but we don't talk about that anymore. We talk about the kind of cancer, so HER2 positive, triple negative, and basically the drivers of the different cancer. And that's what we're trying to do with Alzheimer's, which is basically a generic term for what is likely to be multiple different pathologies. Okay. And cancer has helpfully given us the roadmap of starting to identify what are the different drivers of the different cancers, and then joining that up with identifying those patients for whom their cancer is driven in that way. And then you can vaccinate against it or treat it. We want to be able to do the same with dementia. And because it's in neurodegeneration, this is a process that starts probably 20, 30 years ago before the symptoms start manifesting. You've got to think about early intervention. Otherwise, you can't, at the moment, regrow neurons effectively. So ideally, what you're trying to do is stop the disease progressing. In some future world, we may be able to regrow neurons, but at the moment, that's not the plan. The plan is basically slow and stop the disease before it actually progresses, and before it's too late.
Just a final question, I guess, on obviously there are challenges, and you mentioned a few, especially on the regulatory sphere. What a question for both. What are the main challenges in terms of making this process, reforming this process?
So let me start, and then maybe you finish. So during the pandemic, the UK was unusually good. So the MHRA, which is our UK regulator, we had voted, or the UK had voted for Brexit, and so the European Medicine Agency moved out onto the continent. And so the MHRA, which had done a disproportionate share of medicines regulation, suddenly had to decide what it was going to be when it grew up, because pharma companies were not going to be, submitting their candidate drugs to the FDA in the US, Europe, and then to the UK without a reason. So the MHRA had already design themselves to be a much more collaborative partner, regulator, and as June Rain called it, to stop being a policeman and start becoming more of an air traffic controller. So we benefited from that because she then introduced the concept of rolling reviews for the COVID vaccines, which meant that the vaccine companies could basically produce the data as and when they had it. The regulator would then review it. And so by the time they got their final, pivotal data, the regulator had seen everything else, so then they were able to review that final data set and approve quickly. So that is something that was hugely helpful and speeded things up in the pandemic. It went back a bit because then resources got tight, and I think it's getting better. But I think there's a huge need to basically continue that collaborative process, working with innovators to say, we're here to actually help you get your drugs or your vaccines approved. And obviously they need to be safe, but we need to do that in partnership rather than leave you on your own. And I would add one other thing, which is the regulators and the UK, again, we have this huge ability to actually look at what are the underlying incidents of different diseases, so that if you see a side effect, somebody has a blood clot or has a stroke or whatever it may be, to actually understand, well, what is causative and what is correlated. And it really, really matters that we get to understand that. And since, again, with the data we've got and the AI tools to be able to start to stratify different patient populations and say, well, this is the background instance of these different diseases, that is incredibly helpful as you think about clinical trials and regulatory.
Biggest challenge for you have -2 minutes.
-2, I can sort this. I think the one thing that we all need to do is just remember. Remember what it was like when we had an unknown disease, and remember how good we shone, how good technology became in this country, how we could get things done fast. What didn't need to take 10 years could take 1 year. We saw and streamlined every bit of our ecosystem to do that. We did that because people were in hospital dying, we were suffering, we needed the freedom. And the question is, what's different about other diseases like cancer, heart disease, dementia, strokes, kidney failures? And we've just got to ask the system again. We've lived through a life where discoveries can be made every month, every year. There's a role for paperwork and admin and committees. They allow us to give us quality. But we have within our power in this room the ability to shine as a nation where technology can come from across the world into our hospitals and change lives. We can do this much quicker than before. We can work with the greatest minds, we can pull them together. Kate's done it once, the country did it once, we've done it during the pandemic, and now it's the opportunity for us to shine and do this for other diseases like cancer and herald the new technology through.
Great.
So it is to remember how good we are and what we can achieve.
All right, a rising call to take us all to lunch. Thank you so much, Lennard. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you.